What's up, guys? Iceman here. So what you're about to witness is one of the most horrifying bear attacks that I've covered on this channel yet, and I warn you guys, this one is intense. But before I get into it, I'd like to thank you for all your support. And if you will, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit the bell so you're notified next time I post a video. And if you want to support me further, you can become a channel member or a patron. Links in the description below. So let's get into this chilling tale. Susan was a beautiful young girl with her whole life ahead of her. At 11 years old, she enjoyed baking with her mom, picking flowers, and reading. Susie, as her family called her, was a valued member of the choir and had aspirations to be a music teacher someday. All the more reason as to why it was such a shame, such a travesty to the world and everything in it, such a horror to all that was good, when the bear dragged her little corpse away and ripped her head off. This brutal bear attack takes place in the hills of British Columbia's scenic Okanagan area. The innocent young girl was holidaying with her family near White Man's Creek across Okanagan Lake from Okanagan Landing. Susan's mother was a practicing nurse, a beautiful soul inside and out, with dreams and hopes for her family's future. The loss of her only daughter, so young, crushed her soul forever. The incident led her down a path of depression, excessive drinking, and her eventual self-induced death. Susan's father was also brought to tears and ruin, and although he remarried years later, he never had a child again. His disdain for life and existence from that point on never seemed to cease, and he couldn't imagine subjecting another life to this cursed realm, this place of chaos, this existence of gaining, only to fade into oblivion through suffering for some more and for some less. He saw the wreckage of his beautiful daughter's body. He saw and felt the path in which the bear dragged her helpless crying carcass, and the spills of blood it left, and he couldn't unsee it. He sifted through the weeds where the bear took her and discovered her mangled corpse. Unable to distinguish her torn, bloodied body from the strawberry-patterned dress she was wearing that hellish day, it was almost a blessing in disguise, the fact that from her neck up was nothing left, lest he discover her pretty face looking back at him as he flipped her remains over to embrace her bloodied carcass in despair. Had he seen the soulless face staring back at him in that moment, perhaps he would have met his wife's eventual fate as well, only much sooner. But who was to blame? Why was Susan and her friend, 9-year-old Laura, allowed to picnic alone that day, about 300 feet from the family rental cabin, right along the edge of White Man's Creek? Bear attacks were known to be rare. How could they have predicted it? For years, they had been coming to the area, ever since Susan was only a few years old. Who could have known? About a quarter of all Canada's black bears live in British Columbia. The population is estimated to be between 120,000 to 150,000 individuals. In April, when the weather has begun to warm, black bears emerge from their winter hibernation site in search of food. Shortly after this, June to mid-July, depending on the region, is the typical mating season. Male bears have a 15 to 20 mile range which usually overlaps the ranges of several different female bears. Following the scent trails left by the females, the male bear will traverse his territory much more frequently than normal, even decreasing the amount of time spent feeding in order to make contact with breeding females. Over a typical 6 to 7 week breeding season, a male bear might lose 20% of his body weight. By later summer, the male bear will need to make up for both hibernation and breeding season weight loss in order to begin the hibernation cycle again. It was a scolding, dreary August day. The sun-scorched earth thirsted for rain, but the clouds would offer none of it. Mr. and Mrs. Pickard decided to stay in the cabin that day, out of the sun. He reading the newspaper, and her making some fine strawberry shortcake to go with dinner that evening. A dinner the family would end up never spending together, never again. The bear smelled the coconut cream Susan's mother spread on her body that morning to keep her youthful skin smooth and free of cracks, as her mother used it on herself as well. Its eyes glowed red as it hid within the brush, staring at the young, vulnerable female humans as they unpacked their lunch sacks, spread out a nice quilt, and sat down together to eat their freshly made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. The bear watched hesitantly as the girls took their little nibbles off the sandwiches, chewing on the crunchy nuts and sweet strawberry jam. The fine aroma filled the area, and the creature honed in on the notion that it was certainly feeding time indeed. It's unlikely the bear knew it would attack the humans, but it knew food was there to be had, and the threats and risks were small and seemingly innocent, unable, incapable, passive, and alone. The creature perceived such. The girls together even weighed far less than itself. It drooled as it watched Susan wipe the tangy jelly from her lips. It could smell the fresh jam, like honey from the bees, the high-pitched laughter, the calming, non-threatening sounds of delight the girls would make, and the sense, the ever-continual, tempting sense. It began breathing heavy as it stalked the young females, and steam began emitting from its mouth like a steam engine. Its soulless eyes glaring at Susan's bare, smooth, white legs. Like a helpless fawn, they seemed accessible without retaliation. Its jaws capable of snapping the girl's leg in half with a single bite. Drool oozing from its mouth as the creature remained hidden and slowly began pursuing the children. Susan and Laura got to their feet, tossed their napkins into the picnic basket, and turned their backs to the bear without knowing of its company. They skipped toward the edge of the river, noticing a frog hop into the water upon their arrival. The girls gleefully laughed and began searching for frogs and turtles along the bank, Susan's dress blowing in the wind, exposing her white, tight, unscathed skin, with the bear taking notice. It gazed at her as if she were a piece of raw, skinned chicken, saliva dripping down its jaw as it approached. The thought of such a violent, heinous act was nothing to the beast. It's been days since it fed, especially on meat. Midsummer, or early fall, depending on the region, marks the onset of hyperphagia, the period of winter preparation in which bears pack on body fat over a short period of time. With unlimited food supplies, black bears have been known to consume 15,000 to 20,000 calories per day and several gallons of water. This is about 10 times the amount they would consume in the spring. It's unknown exactly how the bear initially attacked Susan in that moment, but it was likely from behind, according to the gaping wounds all over her back and the account of Laura, who managed to escape. It likely took Susan's fragile body to the ground, ransacked her back, and wrapped its jaws around her neck, breaking it instantly and dragging her away. The girl was most likely dead by the time she reached the thicket from which the animal came and dragged her back to. The soft skin on her stomach and thighs was turned to a ravaged mess of blood and festering torn flesh. Her head found about 20 feet from her body, partly eaten, with her face being unrecognizable, aside from a mole on what was left of her upper right lower chin, and some light freckles on her upper neck. It was an ungodly, heinous scene, and an utter horror that her father had to discover her like that. He found her mangled body nestled in a crevice near the riverbank, a festering mess. The corpse reeked of feces and urine as the bear defecated and pissed on the headless, armless doll like lifeless corpse after partly consuming her, kicking dirt over what was left with intent to return later and continue feasting. The bear was nowhere to be seen upon the father's arrival, shortly after Laura ran back and got the attention of the two adults. Her head wasn't discovered till later, when the bear returned, discovered by rangers, to gnaw on it some more. It was shot and killed on the site, a 4-year-old Bruin, 300 pounds. It was a hideous, brutal black bear attack, one that shook the entire region. The bear tore Susan's body apart, ravaged her body, ripped her head off, defecated and urinated on her carcass, and came back later for more. Jeez, what a freaking hideous scene this was. I mean, this attack took place a few decades ago, and it sounds like the family was just on a nice little vacation, and all of a sudden, this hell had to meet them at their doorstep. Could you imagine discovering a loved one like that, especially if it were a child of yours? I personally don't have a child, so I might not be able to fully grasp what that would be like. But I know that children tend to change the life of the parents forever. All of a sudden, your life has purpose and something to live for. And to imagine that thing being ripped away from you, this thing that was supposed to be there when you die and not the other way around, is just brutal. You really gotta watch out for bears if you have children and let them out in your yard. I'm in Michigan, and I even know of a few people who aren't too far off from my social circle who let their little kids play in the sandbox in bear country. I'm talking about regions where a black bear is rarely sighted, but of course, that's all it takes is one incident, and that's that. And just because it's rare or it hasn't happened yet in your area doesn't mean it never will. Because if it's possible, you better bet your ass that with enough time, the possible will occur. But damn, appreciate you guys for listening. If you will, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit the bell so you're notified next time I post a video, and I'll talk to you soon with more chilling tales from the Iceman.